The village sits in a shallow valley where the land slopes gently. Fields extend outward from a cluster of wooden buildings and dirt paths. Smoke rises from roof openings in thin, steady streams throughout the day. The air smells of wood smoke and earth and animals most of the time. People move between buildings following routes they have walked for many years. The sound of chickens and pigs carries across the open spaces regularly. Dogs wander near the houses and sometimes follow people to the fields. Most structures are made from timber frames filled with wattle and daub. Roofs consist of thatch bundled and tied over wooden supports and beams. Doors hang on leather hinges or wooden pegs that turn in place. Windows are small openings covered with wooden shutters during cold or wet weather. Floors are packed earth, swept smooth and hardened by years of footsteps. Smoke stains darken the interior walls near the roof openings over time. The village contains perhaps 30 households spread across the cultivated land. Each family works strips of land in the open fields nearby. The strips lie separated by narrow unplowed margins of grass and weeds. Pathways cross the fields where people walk to reach their assigned strips. The same families have worked the same general areas for generations. Children learn which strips belong to their household by walking them regularly. A manor house stands apart from the smaller dwellings near the church. The Lord's household occupies this larger structure with its outbuildings and enclosures. The church is built of stone with a wooden roof and door. A priest lives in a small house beside the church building itself. The churchyard contains graves marked with wooden crosses or simple stones half buried. The rhythm of work follows the seasons with small variations each year. Spring brings plowing and planting in sequences determined by custom and weather. Summer means tending crops and performing maintenance on buildings and tools regularly. Autumn requires harvesting and processing grain and preparing for colder months ahead. Winter involves indoor work and caring for animals and repairing damaged equipment slowly. People rise when daylight begins to enter through cracks and openings. They sleep when darkness makes outdoor work impossible or impractical to continue. Meals happen at similar times each day depending on the season. The village bell rings to mark certain times for prayer or work. Most people can hear the bell from anywhere within the village bounds. Food comes from the fields and gardens and animals kept near homes. Grain provides the foundation of most meals throughout the entire year consistently. Vegetables grow in small plots near each dwelling during warmer months only. Chickens produce eggs and occasionally meat when a bird grows old. Pigs are kept and fed scraps and foraged food until slaughter time. The village exists as it has for longer than anyone remembers clearly. Grandparents describe a village much the same as the present one. Changes occur slowly over generations rather than within single lifetimes noticeably. Morning begins with the same movements repeated each day without variation. People rise from sleeping pallets made of straw covered with rough cloth. They wrap themselves in the same garments worn the previous day. Outer layers hang on pegs driven into wall posts during the night. Hands reach for these items in darkness or dim early light automatically. The first task involves rekindling fire from embers banked the night before. Someone kneels beside the central hearth and adds small dry twigs carefully. They blow gently on the glowing embers until flames appear and grow. Larger pieces of wood are added once the fire establishes itself properly. Smoke rises and spreads across the ceiling before finding the roof opening. Water must be carried from the well or stream each morning. Women and children usually perform this task using wooden buckets and clay vessels. They walk the same path to the water source and return carefully. The vessels are heavy when full and require both hands to carry. Water gets poured into larger containers kept inside the dwelling for daily use. Porridge cooks slowly over the fire in an iron pot or clay vessel. Oats or barley are stirred into water or milk until the mixture thickens. Someone tends the pot to prevent burning while others begin additional tasks. The porridge bubbles gently and releases steam that adds moisture to the air. People eat directly from wooden bowls using wooden spoons carved smooth over time. After eating, people move outside to begin work that continues until darkness. Men walk toward the fields carrying tools they have carried many times before. Women remain near the dwelling to manage household tasks and tend animals. Children follow adults and perform smaller versions of the same work gradually. The fields require constant attention during growing seasons and regular maintenance always. Weeds grow between crop plants and must be pulled repeatedly by hand. People move slowly along rows, removing unwanted plants and tossing them aside. Their backs bend forward for hours while hands work steadily through soil. The work continues from one strip to the next without obvious breaks. Plowing happens in spring when soil becomes workable after winter freezing ends. Oxen are yoked to wooden plows reinforced with iron cutting edges if available. A man walks behind the plow guiding it while another leads the oxen. The plow cuts furrows in straight lines across the length of each strip. Soil turns over in dark ribbons that lie in rows waiting for seed. Seed is scattered by hand from bags or baskets carried across the body. The sower walks the plowed strips casting handfuls of grain in sweeping motions. Seeds fall in arcs and land among the turned soil unevenly distributed. Birds follow behind to eat scattered seeds lying exposed on the surface. Children are sometimes sent to walk the fields and frighten birds away. Harrowing follows plowing to break clumps and cover seeds with loose soil. A wooden frame dragged by an animal or person serves this purpose adequately. The harrow bounces and scrapes across the plowed ground, smoothing the surface. This work continues until all planted strips have been harrowed at least once. Fences require repair after winter damage from weather and wandering animals throughout. Wooden stakes are driven into ground to replace rotted or broken posts. Woven branches fill gaps where animals might push through to reach crops. People check fences regularly and make small repairs before problems grow larger. Animals are driven to pasture areas or tethered near the dwelling each morning. Pigs root in woods and clearings searching for food under light supervision. Chickens wander freely near houses pecking at insects and seeds and scraps. Cows or oxen graze on common land shared among village households equally. Dairy work occupies women for portions of each day when animals produce milk. Cows are milked by hand into wooden pails morning and evening consistently. The milk is poured into shallow pans to allow cream to rise. Cream is skimmed and churned into butter through repetitive agitating motions that continue. Buttermilk remains after butter forms and is consumed or used in cooking. Bread baking happens several times weekly following the same process each occasion. Flour is mixed with water and salt and sometimes leaven saved from previous batches. Dough is kneaded on wooden boards until it reaches proper consistency. Shaped loaves sit near the fire to rise before baking in clay ovens. The ovens are heated with wood fires that burn until proper temperature is reached. Fuel must be gathered constantly to maintain fires for cooking and minimal warmth. Children collect fallen branches and twigs from woods and hedgerows every few days. Dried dung from animals is also gathered and stacked for burning later. Peat is cut from boggy areas where available and dried in stacks. All fuel is stored under cover to keep it dry and usable. Clothing requires mending and washing as garments wear from constant use and work. Women examine tunics and hose for tears and worn areas each week. Thread spun from wool or flax is used to stitch repairs by hand. Washing involves soaking garments in cold water and beating them against stones. Garments dry on bushes or wooden frames set in sun and air. Spinning occupies women during evening hours and moments between other tasks throughout the day. Wool fibers are drawn from a distaff and twisted into thread continuously. The spindle turns and drops as thread forms and winds around it. This work continues in small amounts whenever hands are otherwise unoccupied and available. Tools are inspected and maintained to prevent failure during important work periods ahead. Wooden handles are checked for cracks and splits that could cause breaking. Metal edges are sharpened on stones using water and repetitive grinding motions. Leather straps and bindings are replaced when they show signs of weakness. The afternoon continues with the same type of work begun in morning hours. People remain in fields or near dwellings performing tasks in familiar sequences. Hands move through motions practiced since childhood without conscious thought or variation. Time passes marked by the sun's position rather than by counted hours. Evening approaches when shadows lengthen and air begins cooling noticeably from daytime warmth. People return from fields walking the same paths used that morning and previous days. Tools are put away in sheds or storage areas protected from weather. Animals are secured in pens or shelters for the night ahead as always. The evening meal resembles the morning one in content and preparation methods. Porridge or pottage cooked with vegetables and sometimes small amounts of meat fills bowls. Bread from earlier baking accompanies the cooked food when supplies allow for it. People eat sitting on benches or stools near the fire's warmth and light. Darkness brings an end to work requiring vision and precise hand movements. People sit near fires talking quietly or performing simple tasks by feel. Children lie down on pallets and sleep while adults remain awake somewhat longer. The fire is banked carefully to preserve embers for the following morning's rekindling. Sleep comes quickly for those whose bodies are tired from physical labor. People lie on straw pallets covered with woolen blankets or animal hides. The pallets rest directly on the packed earth floor in most dwellings. Families sleep in the same room where cooking and other activities occur. The fire's glow provides the only light once the sun has set. Night sounds include the crackling of wood in the hearth and breathing. Animals stir in their pens outside, making occasional noises that carry through walls. Wind moves through thatch and around wooden shutters, creating familiar background sounds. These noises are constant enough that people no longer notice them consciously. The rhythm of breathing slows as people drift into sleep one by one. Children sleep most deeply while adults wake periodically throughout the night to check fires. Someone might rise to add wood if cold becomes too uncomfortable to ignore. They move quietly to avoid disturbing others sharing the same small space. Morning will begin the same cycle again with fire building and water carrying. The tasks waiting tomorrow are nearly identical to those completed today and yesterday. Fields require the same attention and animals need the same care regardless of day. Food must be prepared using the same methods and ingredients available always. Seasons bring variations in specific tasks but not in the underlying patterns. Spring planting differs from autumn harvesting in action but not in repetitive nature. Summer weeding and winter tool repair both involve the same steady manual work. The village continues following rhythms established before anyone living can remember their beginning. Each generation learns these patterns by watching and then doing alongside older relatives. Children absorb the timing and methods through years of daily participation and observation. By the time they establish their own households, they perform tasks automatically. Their children will learn the same way without need for formal instruction. The village exists within these repeating cycles of daily and seasonal work. One day resembles the previous day with only minor differences in weather. One year resembles previous years with variations too small to change overall patterns. This continuity provides structure and predictability to life within the village boundaries. The fields stretch in long, narrow strips across gently rolling land. Each strip measures roughly the same width as those beside it. Unplowed margins separate one family's strips from another family's strips consistently. Grass grows along these margins, creating slightly raised borders visible from distance. People walk these margins to avoid trampling crops during the growing season. Soil varies in quality from one area to another within the field system. Some strips drain better after heavy rain while others remain waterlogged longer. Families work the strips assigned to them regardless of soil differences or drainage. The same strips pass from parents to children over many generations without change. People know their strips by position and by walking them repeatedly each year. Grain grows slowly from spring planting through summer into early autumn months. Green shoots emerge from soil several weeks after seeds are scattered and covered. The shoots thicken and grow taller as weeks pass and weather permits growth. Heads form at the top of each stalk and fill gradually with kernels. The grain changes color from green to gold as it ripens for harvest. Weeding continues throughout the growing season in the same methodical manner always. People walk between rows of grain-pulling plants that differ from crop plants. The pulled weeds are left lying on soil to dry in sun. Some weeds are carried to animals as fodder when plants are suitable. Most weeds simply remain where they fall until they decompose back into earth. Rain falls unpredictably, requiring no action from those who work the fields daily. People continue their tasks during light rain without seeking shelter or stopping work. Heavy rain sends people back to their dwellings to wait until conditions improve. Wet clothing dries slowly near fires once people return inside their homes. The work resumes once rain stops or lessens enough to make outdoor activity practical. Stones appear in fields each spring, pushed upward by freezing and thawing cycles. People gather stones while walking their strips and carry them to field edges. The stones are piled along margins where they will not interfere with plowing. Stone piles grow larger over years as more stones are added each season. Some stones are used for building walls or repairing structures when their shape permits. Paths cross the fields, connecting the village to outlying strips and distant areas. The paths follow routes worn by countless footsteps over many years of use. Grass grows thin along these paths from constant trampling by feet and hooves. During wet weather, the paths become muddy channels that hold water in ruts. Dry weather hardens the ruts into uneven surfaces that remain until rain softens them. Hedgerows mark boundaries between fields and separate cultivated land from pasture and woods. The hedges consist of thorny bushes and small trees growing densely together over time. They provide barriers that keep animals from wandering into grain fields during growth. Birds nest in hedgerows and small animals shelter in the tangled branches throughout the year. People cut branches from hedgerows occasionally to maintain fences and provide firewood for burning. Pasture land lies beyond the cultivated strips in areas less suitable for plowing. The pasture supports grasses and low plants that animals graze throughout warmer months. Cows and sheep move slowly across the pasture, eating as they go along. A child or older person often watches the animals to keep them together. The animals return to the village at dusk, following the same routes daily. Sheep are sheared in late spring when their wool has grown thick and long. Several men hold each sheep while another cuts the fleece away with large shears. The fleece comes off in one piece when the work is done carefully. Sheep are released after shearing and return to grazing immediately without apparent concern. The fleeces are rolled and stored until women can begin processing the wool. Wool processing begins with sorting fleeces and removing dirty or damaged sections by hand. Clean wool is washed in cold water to remove dirt and lanolin partially. The washed wool is spread on bushes or frames to dry in sun. Dried wool is combed or carded to align the fibers before spinning begins. This preparatory work takes many hours spread over days or weeks as time allows. Flax grows in small plots when soil and conditions are suitable for this crop. The plants produce blue flowers in summer before forming seed pods at season's end. Flax is pulled from the ground rather than cut when stems turn golden. The pulled plants are tied in bundles and left in fields to retting loosens fibers from woody stems through decomposition of binding materials connecting them. Red flax is dried and then beaten to break the woody portions into pieces. The broken stem pieces fall away, leaving long fibers that can be combed. Combing separates coarse fibers from fine fibers used for spinning thread eventually after work. The process is slow and produces small amounts of usable fiber from each bundle. Flax processing happens during winter months when outdoor work is less demanding on time. Spinning flax into linen thread requires more care than spinning wool into yarn. The fibers are finer and break more easily if handled roughly during spinning. Women wet their fingers while spinning to help fibers stick together properly as thread forms. Linen thread is wound onto spindles and stored until enough accumulates for weaving. Weaving happens only occasionally when sufficient thread has been spun and prepared completely. Dyeing thread or cloth occurs rarely, using plants gathered from fields and woods nearby. Madder roots produce red colors while woad leaves create blue shades when processed. Yellow comes from various flowers and bark depending on what is available locally. The dyeing process requires large amounts of plant material and produces uneven results often. Most cloth remains undyed in its natural color because dyeing is difficult and uncertain. Pigs are kept in pens near dwellings where they can be fed scraps. The pigs root and dig in their enclosures, turning the ground to mud. They eat kitchen waste and spoiled food and vegetation gathered from surrounding areas daily. Acorns and beechnuts from woods provide additional food during autumn months when available. Pigs fatten slowly through summer and autumn before slaughter in late autumn or winter. Slaughtering happens when cold weather will preserve meat without immediate spoiling occurring afterward. A pig is killed and bled, and the blood is sometimes collected for cooking. The carcass is scalded with hot water to loosen bristles that are scraped away. Butchering divides the carcass into portions that can be used in different ways. Some meat is salted heavily and packed in barrels for preservation through winter months. Salted pork provides protein during winter when fresh meat is not available regularly. The salt draws moisture from meat, preventing decay that would otherwise occur quickly. Salted meat must be soaked in water before cooking to remove excess salt. The soaking water is changed several times until meat becomes palatable for eating. Even after soaking, the meat remains salter than fresh meat tastes normally when consumed. Smoking meat provides another method of preservation used when conditions allow this work. Meat hangs in smokehouses or chimneys where smoke passes over it constantly for days. The smoke deposits substances on the meat surface that discourage decay and add flavor. Smoked meat keeps longer than fresh meat, but not as long as salted meat. Most households use both methods to preserve different portions of slaughtered animals for storage. Autumn brings cooler temperatures that slow the growth of plants and insects gradually. The grain stands ready for harvest when stalks turn golden and dry completely. People walk through fields checking ripeness by squeezing kernels between fingers to test hardness. Soft kernels mean the grain needs more time, while hard kernels indicate readiness. The decision to begin harvest depends on weather predictions and grain condition together. Carts are prepared for hauling grain from fields to threshing areas near the village. Wooden wheels are checked for damage and axles are greased with animal fat. The cart beds are swept clean of debris from previous use during earlier seasons. Oxen are fitted with yokes that distribute pulling weight across their shoulders evenly. The same carts serve multiple purposes throughout the year, carrying different loads as needed. Children gather in fields during harvest time to help with lighter tasks assigned. They tie sheaves or carry water to workers or chase birds from cut grain. Their presence allows adults to focus on heavier work requiring strength and experience. The children learn by watching and participating in small ways that increase gradually. By the time they reach adulthood, they know all tasks through years of observation. The village rhythm slows slightly during evening hours after the day's work ends completely. People sit outside their dwellings in warmer weather, talking quietly among themselves about familiar topics. The conversations cover the same subjects discussed many times before without exhausting their usefulness. Talk of weather and crops and animals fills the time until darkness makes sitting outside impractical. Dwellings require constant maintenance to remain weatherproof and structurally sound throughout all seasons. Thatch roofs deteriorate gradually from exposure to rain and wind and sun over time. People inspect roofs regularly, looking for thin spots or holes that might allow water inside. Damaged sections are patched with new bundles of straw tied over weakened areas carefully. Complete rethatching happens every several years depending on roof condition and whether damage accumulated. Walls made of wattle and daub develop cracks as the mud mixture dries and shrinks. The cracks allow cold air and moisture to enter the dwelling's interior space during weather. People mix fresh daub using clay and straw and water in proportions learned through experience. The mixture is pressed into cracks and smoothed with hands until the surface is level. Repaired sections dry slowly and may crack again, requiring additional applications of fresh daub. Wooden posts supporting roof structures are checked for rot at ground level where moisture collects. Rotted sections weaken the entire structure and must be addressed before failure occurs. Damaged posts are sometimes propped with additional supports rather than fully replaced when possible. Replacement requires lifting the roof temporarily while the old post is removed and a new one installed. This work involves several men working together to prevent collapse during the process. Doors hang on leather hinges that wear and stretch from repeated use over months. The hinges are replaced when doors begin to sag or drag on the floor. New leather strips are cut from animal hides and fitted to wooden pegs or metal pins. The door is lifted into place and the hinges are tested by swinging repeatedly. Adjustments are made until the door opens and closes smoothly without excessive force required. Shutters covering window openings are repaired when wood splits or fasteners come loose gradually. The shutters protect interiors from weather and provide security when the dwelling is unoccupied. Simple wooden latches hold shutters closed from the inside during night or bad weather. The latches are carved from scrap wood and fitted to work with minimal precision needed. They function adequately despite crude construction and irregular shapes that characterize most handmade items. Floors of packed earth are swept daily to remove debris and maintain a relatively clean surface. The sweeping uses bundles of twigs or straw tied together to form crude brooms. Dirt and food scraps are swept outside where chickens peck through the material looking for edible pieces. The packed earth becomes uneven over time from foot traffic wearing low spots gradually. Additional earth is added to low areas and tamped down until the floor is level again. Hearths are cleaned periodically to remove accumulated ash that would otherwise smother fires eventually. The ash is scooped out carefully and carried outside in wooden or clay containers. Some ash is spread on garden plots to improve soil while the rest is discarded. The hearth stones are swept and sometimes rearranged if they have shifted from heat exposure. A layer of clean sand or ash is spread on the hearth before rebuilding the fire. Storage areas inside dwellings hold tools and food and other items needed regularly. Wooden pegs driven into walls support hanging items like clothing and bags and tools. Shelves made from rough boards rest on brackets or simply lie across supporting beams. The storage arrangements develop organically over time based on convenience and available space within the structure. Everything has a customary location learned by all household members through daily repetition and use. Beds consist of wooden frames holding straw-filled sacks covered with cloth or animal hides. The straw compresses with use and must be refreshed or replaced every few months. Fresh straw is stuffed into the sacks through openings that are then sewn closed. The filled sacks are placed back on the bed frames and covered with whatever materials are available for warmth. Sleeping areas are often shared by multiple family members to conserve space and warmth together. Benches and stools provide seating near the fire and at the table for meals. The furniture is simple and constructed from available wood without elaborate joinery or decoration. Seats wear smooth from years of use and develop a patina from contact with clothing. Broken furniture is repaired with whatever materials are at hand rather than replaced entirely. A stool with one short leg functions adequately if positioned on uneven floor to compensate. Tables are made from rough planks laid across simple trestle supports that can be moved. The planks are not fastened permanently, allowing the table to be disassembled if needed. Most families own only basic furniture because construction requires time and materials not always available. The lack of furniture does not create particular hardship since most activities happen while standing or sitting on the ground. Pottery vessels hold liquids and dry goods and serve as cooking containers over fires. The pots are made locally by someone with basic skill in shaping and firing clay. Vessels crack or break from use and thermal stress and are replaced as needed. Broken pottery pieces are discarded in refuse piles near dwellings where they accumulate over years. Some broken pieces are repurposed as scoops or scrapers when their shape permits such use. Wooden bowls and cups are carved from available wood and smoothed through use over time. Each household owns several such items sufficient for daily meals and drinking water or ale. The wooden vessels absorb liquids and flavors and darken with age and repeated use. They are washed by wiping with cloth or rinsing with water but never thoroughly cleaned. The bowls and cups last for years if not cracked or split during use. Baskets woven from willow or other flexible plant materials serve numerous purposes around the dwelling. They carry vegetables from gardens or hold gathered materials or store small items inside. The baskets are made during winter months when outdoor work is less demanding on time. Worn baskets are repaired by adding new woven sections or are dismantled for materials. Making baskets requires no special tools, only knowledge of weaving techniques learned through watching others. Rope and cordage are made by twisting plant fibers or animal hair together repeatedly. The twisted strands are combined to create thicker rope for various uses around the homestead. Rope is used to tie bundles or secure loads or hang items from beams. It wears and weakens from use and exposure, requiring regular replacement throughout the year. Making rope occupies hands during evening hours when other work cannot be done easily. Leather goods include bags and straps and simple shoes worn for protection from rough ground. The leather comes from animal hides processed through scraping and treating to remove hair. Tanning uses tree bark or other materials to preserve the hide and make it flexible. The process takes weeks and produces leather of variable quality depending on materials and skill. Most leather items are made within the household or obtained from someone nearby with better skills. Wooden tools include handles for metal implements and standalone items like mallets and wedges. The wood is shaped using knives and axes and smoothed by scraping with sharp edges. Tool handles are fitted to metal heads and secured with wedges driven into splits. The wooden tools wear and break and are replaced as needed using wood gathered locally. Making and maintaining tools is ongoing work that never reaches completion because items constantly need attention. Metal tools are scarce and valuable and maintained carefully to extend their useful life. Iron blades are sharpened regularly and protected from moisture that causes rust and deterioration. Damaged metal tools are repaired by someone with smithing knowledge if such a person is available. Otherwise, the tools are used in their damaged state until they become completely useless. New metal tools are obtained rarely due to cost and limited availability in the village. Cleaning tasks occur daily in small amounts rather than in concentrated efforts at intervals. Surfaces are wiped when they become noticeably dirty or sticky from food and handling. Water used for cleaning is cold and often insufficient to remove all residue completely. The cleaning leaves surfaces somewhat cleaner than before but never truly clean by later standards. This level of cleanliness is normal and expected and causes no concern among household members. Laundry happens infrequently because garments are few and water must be carried and heated. Clothing is worn for weeks between washings unless it becomes extremely soiled from work. The washing process is labor-intensive and hard on fabric, causing wear over time. Garments are beaten against stones or scrubbed with hands to remove embedded dirt. They dry slowly, especially during cold or damp weather when air holds moisture readily. Vermin, including mice and insects, share dwellings with human occupants throughout the year. The animals find food scraps and warmth and shelter inside the structures readily available. People accept their presence as normal and make minimal efforts to eliminate them completely. Cats are kept partially for companionship but mainly to control mice and rat populations somewhat. The cats wander freely and hunt both inside and outside the dwelling as they choose. Animals require daily care that follows the same patterns throughout the year with minor variations. Chickens are let out of their shelter each morning to forage around the dwelling. They scratch in dirt looking for insects and seeds and any edible matter available. The birds return to their shelter at dusk without needing to be driven or collected. A simple enclosure with roosting poles provides adequate housing for the small flock maintained. Eggs are collected daily from nests made of straw in corners of the chicken shelter. The number of eggs varies by season, with fewer produced during cold winter months. Fresh eggs are eaten immediately while excess eggs are preserved in various ways when available. Some eggs are traded to neighbors for other goods when a household has surplus. Hens that stop laying eggs are eventually killed and cooked for their meat. Pigs root in their enclosures, turning soil and creating muddy wallows they use regularly. The animals are fed kitchen scraps and vegetable waste and anything else deemed suitable. They also receive acorns and other foraged food brought from woods during autumn months. The pigs grow slowly, reaching slaughter weight after a year or more of feeding. Young pigs are kept to replace those slaughtered, ensuring a continuous supply over time. Cows or oxen are valuable animals requiring more careful management than smaller livestock demand. They are fed hay during winter when pasture grass is not available for grazing. The hay is stored in covered areas to keep it dry enough to prevent rot. Animals are checked daily for signs of illness or injury that might threaten their health. A sick or injured animal represents significant loss because replacement is difficult and expensive. Milking happens twice daily when cows are producing milk after giving birth to calves. The milk is used fresh or processed into butter and cheese for preservation and storage. Fresh milk sours quickly in warm weather, so it is consumed promptly when possible. Soured milk is not wasted but used in cooking or fed to pigs. Milk production varies seasonally, with less available during winter months when grass is unavailable. Calves are born in spring when grass begins growing and providing food for mothers. The calves nurse from their mothers for several months before being gradually weaned onto grass. Male calves may be raised for work animals or slaughtered for meat when small. Female calves are usually kept to replace aging cows that no longer produce milk. The cycle continues with new calves born each spring following the established pattern always. Geese are kept by some households for their eggs and meat and feathers. The birds graze on grass and require less feeding than other domestic animals generally. They are aggressive and loud, making them useful for alerting people to strangers approaching dwellings. Geese are plucked periodically for feathers used in bedding and other soft goods. The plucking does not harm the birds, which grow new feathers to replace those removed. Dogs live around the village serving various purposes but rarely kept as pets exclusively. They help guard dwellings and livestock by barking at unfamiliar sounds or approaching people. Some dogs accompany men to fields or woods and assist with hunting small game. The dogs scavenge for food around the village and are rarely fed deliberately. They reproduce freely, and unwanted puppies are usually drowned or abandoned to die. Cats control rodent populations around dwellings and storage areas where grain is kept nearby. The cats hunt independently and receive no regular feeding from people in most cases. They live semi-wild lives while remaining loosely associated with human households for shelter. Kittens are sometimes drowned when too many are born at once and cannot survive. The surviving cats continue the work of hunting mice and rats without requiring attention. Horses are rare in the village and owned only by the lord or wealthier households. The animals are used for riding and pulling carts and occasionally for plowing when available. Horses require more food and care than oxen and are less practical for most work. People admire horses but have little direct interaction with them in daily life routines. The presence of a horse indicates status and wealth beyond what most villagers possess. Bees are sometimes kept in woven straw hives placed near dwellings or in sheltered locations. The bees forage widely and require no feeding or care from people maintaining them. Honey is harvested once or twice yearly by removing portions of honeycomb from hives. The process disturbs the bees, which sting those attempting to take their honey stores. Smoke is used to calm bees before reaching into hives to remove the comb. Wild animals are occasionally seen near the village or in surrounding fields and woods. Deer appear in early morning or evening to graze at field edges before retreating. Foxes hunt small animals around the village and sometimes kill chickens if shelters are insecure. Rabbits live in hedgerows and fields and are trapped or hunted for their meat. These wild animals are viewed as either food sources or threats depending on the species. Birds of various kinds live around the village and are noticed mainly when useful. Crows and ravens scavenge and are considered nuisances that damage crops when they gather. Sparrows and other small birds eat seeds and insects and are largely ignored by people. Owls hunt at night and their calls are heard, but the birds themselves rarely seen. People pay little attention to birds unless they affect crops or provide food. Weather determines much of daily activity and what work can be accomplished effectively. Rain stops field work and keeps people inside or under shelter waiting for improvement. Wind dries laundry and grain but damages thatch roofs and makes fire management more difficult. Cold slows all work and makes outdoor tasks uncomfortable but does not stop necessary activities. Heat brings different discomforts but allows for longer working days when daylight extends into evening. Seasonal changes are marked by shifts in temperature and daylight length and plant growth. Spring brings warming and longer days and the beginning of planting and outdoor work. Summer provides the warmest weather and longest days for accomplishing the most demanding labor. Autumn brings cooling and shorter days and the urgency of harvest before winter arrives. Winter means cold and short days and a focus on indoor work and animal care. The manor lord occasionally requires labor from village households for specific projects or maintenance. People are obligated to work on the lord's land for certain days each year. This work is performed alongside their own farming and household responsibilities when demanded. The required labor includes plowing and harvesting and repairing roads and structures on manor property. People fulfill these obligations because they are required, and refusal brings consequences they cannot afford. The church requires tithes of grain and other produce from each household annually. A portion of each harvest is set aside and delivered to the church. The priest stores the collected tithes and uses them for church maintenance and support. People give these tithes as expected without questioning the practice or its fairness. The church stands as a central presence in village life, though daily religious observance is minimal. Interactions between households involve borrowing tools and sharing labor and occasional exchanges of goods. A family needing extra hands for harvest asks neighbors who will later request reciprocal help. Tools too expensive for single households to own are shared among several families. These arrangements function through informal agreements and expectations rather than written contracts or formal terms. People generally cooperate because survival depends on mutual assistance in times of need. Disputes between neighbors occur over boundaries and animals and perceived slights that accumulate over time. The disagreements are usually settled through discussion among the involved parties without outside involvement. Older villagers sometimes mediate when disputes cannot be resolved directly between those involved in conflict. Their judgments are based on custom and previous similar cases they remember from years past. Most disputes are minor and are forgotten once resolved or simply allowed to fade. Violence is rare but not unknown when conflicts escalate beyond verbal disagreements and posturing. Fights break out occasionally between men over insults or property or other provocations perceived. The fights are usually brief and end when one party yields or others intervene. Serious injuries from fighting are uncommon because weapons are not typically used in such confrontations. The community generally disapproves of violence that disrupts the peace necessary for cooperative work. Theft is considered a serious offense because property is scarce and difficult to replace easily. Stolen items are usually recovered and returned when the thief is identified by witnesses. Punishment for theft varies depending on the value of stolen goods and circumstances surrounding it. Minor thefts might result in public shaming, while serious thefts bring harsher consequences from the Lord. People generally refrain from stealing because the small community makes concealing such actions nearly impossible. Illness and injury are constant concerns that can reduce a household's ability to work. People continue working through minor ailments that would stop activity in later times completely. Rest is a luxury afforded only when sickness makes movement impossible or extremely difficult. Herbal remedies are tried for various conditions with uncertain and inconsistent results over time. Most illnesses either resolve on their own or prove fatal within days or weeks. Cooking happens throughout the day as different foods require preparation at different times. Porridge simmers slowly over low fire for the morning meal as people begin waking. The pot hangs from an iron hook that can be adjusted to control heat. Someone stirs occasionally to prevent sticking and burning on the bottom surface of the vessel. The porridge thickens gradually and is ready when it reaches the right consistency judged by appearance. Pottage is prepared for the midday or evening meal using whatever ingredients are available currently. Vegetables and grains are added to water in a pot and cooked slowly. Small amounts of meat or fat are included when available to add flavor. The mixture cooks for hours until vegetables soften and flavors blend together adequately. Pottage is eaten warm directly from the pot or ladled into individual wooden bowls. Bread baking requires preparation that begins the evening before baking day when dough is mixed. Flour and water and salt are combined and kneaded into a smooth elastic mass. The dough is left to rise overnight covered with cloth in a warm spot. Morning brings the shaping of loaves and final rising before the oven is heated. The oven is a clay structure heated by burning wood inside until the right temperature. Removing coals and ashes prepares the oven for receiving the shaped loaves of dough. The loaves are placed inside using a long wooden paddle to avoid burns from heat. The oven opening is sealed with a wooden door or wet cloth to trap heat. Bread bakes for a period judged by experience rather than measured time precisely. The finished loaves are removed and cooled before being stored for coming days of eating. Ale brewing happens periodically when supplies run low and ingredients are available for the process. Malted grain is mixed with hot water and allowed to steep until sugars extract. The liquid is drained off and yeast is added to begin fermentation over days. The fermenting ale produces bubbles and foam and a distinctive smell that fills the dwelling. Finished ale is stored in wooden barrels or large clay vessels sealed against air exposure. Ale provides a safer drink than water, which often carries illness from unknown sources. Everyone drinks ale, including children who consume weaker versions made for their consumption. The ale is relatively low in alcohol compared to later brewing, but still noticeable. Fresh ale tastes best, but older ale is consumed until it becomes too sour. Brewing knowledge passes from mothers to daughters through observation and participation over many years. Preserving food for winter requires work during harvest season, when abundance allows storing surplus. Vegetables are dried by slicing thin and laying in sun for days until moisture evaporates. Dried vegetables keep for months if stored in dry locations away from moisture and pests. Cabbage and root vegetables are sometimes kept in pits dug in the ground and covered. The earth provides cool storage that slows decay but does not prevent it entirely. Salting meat preserves it by drawing out moisture that bacteria need for causing spoilage. Heavy layers of salt cover meat surfaces completely, leaving no areas exposed to air. The salted meat sits for days while salt penetrates deeply into the flesh throughout. Excess salt is brushed off before the meat is packed into barrels or hung. Salt is expensive, so it is used sparingly and mainly for preserving valuable meat. Smoking adds flavor while creating a surface that resists decay for some weeks or months. Meat hangs in chimneys or special structures where smoke passes over it constantly each day. The smoking continues for days or weeks depending on the size of meat pieces. Smoked meat develops a dark exterior and a distinctive taste absorbed from wood smoke. Different woods produce different flavors, though most people use whatever wood is readily available. Cheese making uses milk that would otherwise sour and become unpalatable within days of milking. The milk is warmed and rennet is added to cause separation into curds and whey. Curds are cut and drained and pressed to remove remaining liquid whey gradually. The pressed cheese is left to age in cool conditions for weeks or months. Aged cheese becomes harder and develops stronger flavors while keeping much longer than fresh milk. Butter is made by churning cream until fat globules stick together, forming solid mass. The churning involves agitating cream in a wooden vessel for extended periods, requiring effort. Children or older people often perform this task while sitting and working the churn steadily. Butter forms suddenly after long churning and is removed and washed with cold water. The butter is salted lightly to extend its keeping time before it spoils from warmth. Gathering wild food supplements cultivated crops and provides variety in the limited diet available. Women and children know which plants are edible and where they grow in surrounding areas. Greens are gathered in spring when they first appear and are cooked or eaten raw. Nettles are collected wearing gloves and are cooked to remove their sting before eating them. Wild garlic grows in woods and is gathered for its strong flavor added to bland foods. Nuts fall from trees in autumn and are collected from the ground by hand. Hazelnuts are particularly abundant in hedgerows where children gather them in baskets regularly during season. The nuts are cracked open and kernels are picked out and eaten or stored. Stored nuts keep through winter if protected from moisture and mice seeking food themselves. Nutshells are saved for burning as fuel since nothing is wasted that has any use. Mushrooms appear after rain in woods and fields during appropriate seasons for their growth. Only familiar types are gathered because poisonous varieties cause illness or death if consumed accidentally. The mushrooms are used immediately because they spoil within hours of being picked from ground. They are cooked in pottage or fried in fat when fat is available for cooking. Mushrooms add flavor and texture to meals that otherwise consist of similar ingredients repeatedly served. Fish come from streams and rivers when someone has time for catching them occasionally during year. A few men in the village fish using nets or hooks made from bone or metal. Fish are eaten fresh on the day they are caught because preservation methods are limited. Small fish are cooked whole while larger fish are cut into pieces for cooking. Fishing provides a break from field work and adds variety to diet when successful. Eels live in streams and are caught using basket traps set overnight in water. The traps allow eels to enter but prevent them from finding the exit to escape. Caught eels are killed and skinned and cooked the same day they are removed from traps. Eel meat is rich and provides substantial food, though many find the texture unpleasant initially. The traps are checked daily and reset after removing any caught eels from inside them. Water for cooking and drinking is carried from the village well or nearby stream daily. The well is a communal resource maintained by collective labor when repairs are needed to maintain function. A rope and bucket allow people to draw water from below ground where it collects. The bucket is lowered and fills and is pulled back up by hand repeatedly for each vessel. Carrying water is heavy work assigned usually to women and children who make multiple trips. Fire must be maintained constantly because rekindling from nothing is difficult without proper materials available. Embers are banked each night under ash to preserve them until morning when fire rebuilds. If fire goes out completely, someone must obtain embers from a neighbor's hearth to restart their own. Flint and steel can create sparks, but catching the spark requires dry tinder and skill. Most people avoid letting their fire die completely because rekindling is troublesome and time-consuming. Fuel consumption is substantial, requiring constant gathering to maintain adequate supply for cooking and warmth always needed for comfort during cold periods when temperatures drop significantly below comfortable levels, making indoor spaces uncomfortable without heat provided by burning available combustible materials collected from surrounding areas. Clothing is made from wool or linen depending on what materials are available to households. Wool comes from sheep raised in the village and processed through multiple steps before becoming fabric. Linen requires growing flax and processing the plant stems into fibers suitable for spinning thread. Both materials require substantial work before they become cloth ready for cutting and sewing garments. Most people own very few garments and wear the same items daily until they wear out. Tunics are the primary garment worn by men and consist of simple rectangular pieces sewn together. The tunic hangs from shoulders to knees and is belted at the waist with rope or leather. Sleeves are long and loose, allowing freedom of movement during work throughout the day. The same tunic is worn for all activities without changing for different tasks or occasions. Tunics are made from undyed wool or linen in natural colors that show dirt less obviously. Hose cover legs and are made from wool fabric cut and sewn to fit roughly. They are tied to the belt with cords to keep them from falling down during movement. The hose wear through quickly at knees and heels from constant friction and kneeling on ground. Patches are sewn over worn areas to extend the life of the garment as long as possible. Eventually the hose become too damaged to repair and are discarded or repurposed as rags. Women wear long tunics that reach to their ankles and cover most of the body. An outer tunic or apron protects the inner garment from dirt during cooking and other work. The garments are loose-fitting and made from rectangles of cloth requiring minimal cutting and fitting. Women cover their hair with cloth wrappings when working or appearing in public spaces outside dwellings. The head covering is considered proper and its absence would be noticed by other villagers. Children wear smaller versions of adult clothing made from old garments cut down and resewn. Growing children outgrow their clothing quickly, requiring frequent adjustments or replacements as they get larger. Garments are passed from older children to younger siblings as they are outgrown by the first wearer. The clothing shows obvious wear and repair by the time it reaches the youngest children. Very young children wear simple tunics that are easy to remove when necessary for their care. Footwear consists of simple leather shoes or wooden clogs worn when weather or work requires protection. Many people go barefoot during warm weather to save wear on their limited footwear available. Shoes are made by cutting leather into rough foot shapes and sewing pieces together simply. The shoes have no left or right distinction and wear into shape through use over time. Wooden clogs are carved from single pieces of wood and worn over wrapped cloth for cushioning. Cloaks made from wool provide warmth and protection from rain during cold or wet weather. The cloak is a large piece of cloth fastened at the shoulder with a pin or tied with cord. It covers the body from shoulders to knees or lower depending on the size of cloth available. Wet wool retains some insulating properties even when soaked through by rain completely during long exposure to weather outdoors, where work continues regardless of conditions faced by those performing necessary tasks required. Repairs to clothing occupy time during evenings when other work is not possible due to darkness. Tiers are sewn closed using thread and needles made from bone or metal when available for use. Patches cut from worn-out garments are sewn over holes and thin areas to extend usability. The patching and mending continues until the garment is more patches than original fabric remaining. Eventually the garment is too damaged to function and is cut into strips for other uses. Washing clothing happens infrequently because the process is labor-intensive and wears fabric faster. Garments are beaten against stones while wet to loosen dirt embedded in the fibers deeply. Cold water is usually used because heating large amounts of water requires substantial fuel and time. The wet garments are wrung by hand to remove excess water before drying begins slowly. Drying happens outdoors on bushes or indoor near fires during wet weather when outside drying is impossible. Spinning thread from wool or flax fibers occupies women during any available moment throughout days. The distaff holds prepared fibers while the spinner draws them out and twists into thread. The spindle hangs and turns as thread forms and winds around the shaft steadily, with each motion repeated countless times during each session of work performed whenever hands are otherwise unoccupied by other tasks demanding attention and effort from those responsible for producing thread needed for weaving cloth used by household members for making garments worn daily. Weaving transforms thread into cloth on simple looms set up inside dwellings or in sheltered areas. The loom holds vertical threads while horizontal threads are passed through, creating interlaced fabric slowly. The weaver works methodically, throwing the shuttle back and forth between the vertical threads repeatedly during long sessions of focused work requiring attention to maintain consistent tension and spacing throughout the developing cloth that grows gradually as work continues over days or weeks depending on the length of cloth being produced for specific purposes planned. Fulling cloth involves wetting and beating woven wool to mat the fibers together more densely. The process shrinks the cloth while making it thicker and more resistant to wind. Feet are sometimes used to tread wet cloth in containers to full it evenly. The fulling continues until the cloth reaches the desired thickness and feel, judged by experience. Fulled cloth is then dried and may be brushed to raise a nap on the surface. Cutting cloth for garments uses no patterns but relies on simple geometric shapes and experience. Rectangles and triangles combine to create tunics and other garments without complex fitting or shaping. Cloth is expensive in terms of labor required, so cutting is done carefully to minimize waste. Scraps are saved for patches or other small projects requiring small amounts of fabric only. Nothing is discarded if it has any possible use remaining for any purpose whatsoever, regardless of how minor. Sewing joins pieces of cloth using needles made from bone or metal and thread spun earlier. The stitches are simple running stitches or overcasting along edges to prevent raveling of cut fabric. Seams are not finished in elaborate ways but are functional and adequate for their purpose. Sewing happens in daylight near windows or doors because the work requires vision for accuracy. Women sew while sitting and talking or while supervising children who play nearby during work sessions. Buttons and fasteners are rarely used on village clothing, which fastens with pins or ties instead. Brooches made from metal or carved bone pin cloaks at the shoulder or secure other garments. Ties made from twisted cord or leather strips fasten garments that need closure for practicality. The fastenings are simple and functional without decoration or unnecessary elaboration beyond basic utility for keeping garments properly positioned on the body during movement and work performed throughout each day. Belts serve both functional and decorative purposes, though decoration is minimal in most cases observed. Leather straps with simple buckles or tied ends cinch tunics at the waist for ease of movement during labor-intensive tasks requiring bending and reaching and lifting performed regularly by all able-bodied members of each household, contributing to collective survival through individual efforts combined. Hats or hoods provide protection from sun and rain and cold depending on season and weather. Simple hoods attached to cloaks or are separate pieces worn over the head as needed. Straw hats woven from local materials protect from sun during summer field work in exposed locations. The head coverings are practical items that receive hard use and need replacement every few years. Making new head coverings uses skills learned through watching others and practicing with available materials nearby. Jewelry is rarely owned by common villagers and consists of simple items when present at all. A brass ring or bone pin might be someone's only personal adornment, worn occasionally for special times like holy days observed by attending church services that mark the passage of time through the year in repeating cycles familiar to everyone living within the village boundaries. The church stands as the only stone building most villagers enter during their entire lives regularly. Services are held on Sundays and holy days throughout the year following the church calendar. People gather in the church standing or kneeling on the stone floor during the service. The priest conducts the service in Latin, which most people do not understand at all. They know when to kneel and stand through habit and by watching others around them. The interior of the church is dim with light entering through small windows set high. Smoke from candles and oil lamps adds haze to the air inside the enclosed space. The stone walls hold cold even during warm weather outside in the surrounding village areas. People accept the discomfort as part of attending services require. By custom and religious obligation. The service continues for a period that seems long to children who fidget and are corrected. Religious instruction comes mainly through images painted on walls and through the priest's words when he speaks in the common language between Latin prayers and chants heard but not fully understood by most present during services attended out of obligation and habit formed through lifelong participation. Stories from Scripture are told repeatedly so people know them despite not reading the texts themselves directly from written sources unavailable to them. Saints' days mark the calendar and provide occasions for reduced work and communal gatherings after church. The days are welcomed as breaks from constant labor, though work never stops completely even on these occasions when some tasks must continue regardless of the day or season or weather conditions present, requiring attention from someone responsible for animals and essential maintenance that cannot be delayed. Baptisms happen shortly after birth, with infants brought to the church for the ceremony performed. The baby is held over the font while the priest pours water and speaks the required words. Parents and godparents stand nearby as witnesses to the ritual that marks the child's entry into the Christian community, formally recognized through this ancient practice continued without question by all members. Marriages are arranged between families and blessed by the priest at the church door traditionally. The ceremony is brief, with the couple exchanging vows in the presence of witnesses gathered. A celebration follows with food and ale shared among family and neighbors attending the event. Marriages usually join people from the same village or nearby villages within walking distance of each other. The unions are practical arrangements ensuring land and labor are properly distributed among households continuing into future generations. Deaths require burial in the churchyard within days of someone's passing from this life entirely. The body is wrapped in cloth and carried to the grave dug by family members. The priest speaks prayers while the body is lowered into the ground and covered with earth. A wooden cross or simple stone marks the location initially, though markers decay and disappear over time. Graves are reused after years pass and previous occupants are forgotten by those remaining alive. The churchyard contains graves going back many generations, with older graves unmarked and locations uncertain. People walk through the churchyard regularly on paths connecting different parts of the village areas together. Children play among the graves without particular reverence or fear of the dead beneath the ground. The churchyard is simply another part of the village landscape integrated into daily life and movement. The priest lives in a house near the church and is supported by tithes collected from villagers. He is usually the only person in the village who can read and write both Latin and the common language used for speaking among villagers in daily interactions and transactions. People approach the priest for blessings and advice and mediation of disputes when necessary for resolution. His position gives him authority, though his living conditions are not dramatically better than other villagers. Holy relics are kept in the church and are believed to have protective or healing powers. The relics might be bone fragments or pieces of cloth associated with saints from long ago. People venerate the relics during certain celebrations when they are displayed for viewing by those gathered. The belief in relics' power is unquestioned and provides comfort to people facing uncertainties beyond their control. Confession occurs periodically when the priest makes himself available for hearing sins admitted privately. People confess wrongdoings and receive penance, which might involve prayers or fasting or other acts. The confessional process provides a way to address guilt and seek forgiveness for transgressions committed. Most sins confessed are minor violations of expected behavior rather than serious crimes against others. Fasting is required during certain periods of the church year when meat is forbidden entirely. Fish is allowed during fast days, making it the primary protein when available from local sources. The fasting is observed with varying degrees of strictness depending on household resources and personal piety. Wealthy households can obtain fish more easily, while poor households simply eat less during fasting periods. Pilgrimages are undertaken by some villagers traveling to holy sites seeking blessings or healing or fulfilling vows made during times of crisis or illness, when divine intervention was sought through promises made in desperation or devotion, depending on individual circumstances and motivations for undertaking difficult journeys. Holy water is kept in the font and people cross themselves upon entering the church building. The gesture is automatic and performed without conscious thought by those who have done it since childhood. Holy water is sometimes taken home for blessing houses or sick family members in need. The water is believed to carry protective powers that guard against evil or misfortune. Bells ring to mark times for prayer and to call people to services held regularly. The sound carries across the village and surrounding fields where people hear and respond accordingly. Bells also ring to mark deaths and weddings and other significant events in community life. The bells are among the few loud sounds heard regularly in the otherwise quiet village environment. Prayer happens individually at home as well as during church services attended by the community. People pray before meals and before sleep, asking for protection and provision from God. The prayers are simple and formulaic, repeated from memory without variation or elaboration beyond basic requests. Prayer provides comfort and a sense of connection to something beyond daily physical existence. Crosses are carved into doorposts and beams for protection against evil spirits believed to threaten households. The crosses are simple marks made with knives during construction or added later when needed. People believe the symbols have power to repel harmful forces even if they cannot explain how. The beliefs are held without skepticism or need for evidence beyond tradition and custom. Curses are feared as potential causes of misfortune when someone wishes harm on another person. A person who suffers unexpected loss might suspect they have been cursed by an enemy. Breaking curses might involve rituals performed by the priest or by someone with knowledge of such things. The fear of curses influences behavior as people try to avoid giving offense to others unnecessarily. Charms made from various materials are carried or hung in homes for protection and good luck. Horseshoes and special stones and bundles of herbs serve this purpose for different households based on local traditions and beliefs passed down through generations without written record or formal instruction from authorities. The charms are considered helpful even if their effectiveness cannot be proven or measured objectively. Omens are observed in animal behavior and weather patterns and unusual events that seem significant somehow. A bird entering a house might be interpreted as a sign of coming death in the family. Unusual cloud formations or lights in the sky generate discussion and speculation about their meaning for the community. People look for patterns and meaning in events beyond simple natural explanations available to them. Dreams are sometimes considered messages or warnings that should be attended to with some seriousness when they seem particularly vivid or disturbing to the dreamer upon waking and remembering what was seen during sleep when the mind wanders freely without conscious control or direction from waking thoughts. Seasonal celebrations combine Christian holy days with older practices from before Christianity dominated the region. Spring celebrations involve blessing fields before planting begins for the growing season ahead when food will be produced. Harvest festivals give thanks for successful crops gathered and stored for winter consumption by all members of the community, sharing in the collective bounty produced through shared labor and cooperation. Tools used in daily work are simple implements made from wood and iron and other available materials. Handles are carved from straight branches or split wood shaped to fit the hand comfortably. The wood is smoothed through use over time rather than through careful finishing when first made. Metal parts are forged by a blacksmith who lives in the village or a nearby settlement. The same tools are used for years and passed between generations when they remain functional. Axes are used for cutting wood and clearing brush and shaping timber for construction projects undertaken. The iron head is fitted to a wooden handle and secured with a wedge driven tightly. The blade is sharpened regularly on a whetstone using water to cool the metal during grinding. A dull axe is dangerous because it requires more force and can glance off wood unpredictably. Axes are valuable tools that receive careful maintenance to prevent damage or loss through carelessness. Scythes cut grass and grain with long curved blades attached to wooden handles at angles. The user swings the scythe in arcing motions that cut plants close to ground level. The blade must be sharp to cut cleanly without tearing or pulling at plant stems. Sharpening happens frequently during use with a whetstone carried in the field for this purpose. The scythe requires skill to use effectively without injury to the user or others nearby. Sickles are smaller curved blades used for cutting grain by hand in close quarters where scythes cannot be swung safely or effectively in tight spaces between rows. The worker grasps grain stalks with one hand and cuts with the other using repeated strokes. The work is slow and tiring, requiring constant bending and reaching throughout long days. Sickles are simpler than scythes and easier to sharpen and maintain in working condition. Hoes break up soil and remove weeds between planted rows during the growing season regularly. The iron blade is fitted to a long wooden handle, allowing the user to work while standing. The blade is pushed or pulled through soil, cutting weed roots below the surface level. Hoeing is repetitive work that continues for hours without variation in motion or technique applied. The same ground is hoed multiple times through the season as new weeds appear constantly. Rakes gather cut hay and grain and smooth soil after planting has been completed satisfactorily. Wooden tines are fitted into a crossbar attached to a long handle used for pulling. The rake drags across ground, collecting loose material into piles for gathering and moving elsewhere. Rakes are made entirely of wood in most cases without metal parts, requiring blacksmith work. Broken tines are replaced individually without discarding the entire tool when damage occurs to single parts. Shovels move earth and manure and other loose materials from one place to another as needed. The blade is iron fitted to a wooden handle at an angle suitable for scooping. Digging requires pushing the blade into soil with foot pressure on the upper edge. The shovel lifts material that is then tossed aside or into a cart for transport. Shovels wear at the blade edge and must be sharpened or replaced when they become too thin. Pitchforks lift and move hay and straw and manure with long wooden handles and metal tines. The tines pierce into the material, allowing it to be lifted and carried short distances. Forking hay into storage areas or loading carts is repetitive work requiring steady rhythm and effort. The tines can break if overloaded or if striking stones hidden in the material. Broken tines are sometimes replaced, though often the entire tool is discarded when damage occurs extensively. Flails thresh grain by beating it against a hard surface to separate kernels from straw. The flail consists of a long handle connected by leather or rope to a shorter striking piece. The tool is swung overhead and brought down repeatedly on grain laid out for threshing. The rhythm of flailing is important to maintain efficiency and avoid hitting oneself with the swinging striker. Multiple people working together create a coordinated pattern of strikes that continues for hours without stopping. Winnowing fans are shallow baskets used to toss grain and chaff into the air for separation. The basket is filled partially and tossed upward, allowing wind to carry away lighter chaff. The heavier grain falls back into the basket and is saved while chaff blows away. This process repeats many times until the grain is clean enough for storage and use. Winnowing requires wind and cannot be done effectively on calm days without air movement present. Grinding stones crush grain into flour using two circular stones rotating against each other under pressure. The upper stone turns while the lower stone remains stationary with grain fed between them. The ground flour emerges from the edges and is collected in cloth or containers placed around the base of the stones used for this essential task performed regularly. Turning the grinding stone requires strength and is often done by women or older children working together in shifts during long grinding sessions needed to process enough grain. Sieve separate fine flour from coarser particles that need additional grinding to achieve proper consistency. The sieve consists of cloth or woven material stretched over a wooden frame held and shaken. Fine particles fall through while larger pieces remain on top to be ground again. The sifting process produces flour of different grades, with the finest used for better bread. Coarser material is used for porridge or animal feed depending on quality and household needs. Knives serve multiple purposes in food preparation and craft work and general cutting tasks encountered daily. Blades are made from iron or steel and fitted to wooden or bone handles shaped for gripping. Knives are sharpened frequently because sharp blades are safer and more efficient than dull ones. Each person usually has a personal knife carried and used throughout the day for various needs. The knife might be the only metal tool owned by an individual person in some cases. Needles made from bone or metal are used for sewing cloth and leather and repairing items made from flexible materials that can be joined with thread or cord passed through holes. The needles have eyes for threading and pointed ends for piercing material being sewn together. Metal needles are valued, but bone needles work adequately for most purposes and can be made locally. Needles are small and easily lost, requiring careful storage when not in active use currently. Spindles turn fibers into thread through twisting and winding motions repeated countless times during spinning sessions. The spindle is a weighted shaft that hangs and rotates as thread forms and wraps around it. The weight helps maintain rotation while the spinner draws out fibers and twists them together. Spindles are simple tools that can be made from any straight stick and a weight attached. They are carried easily and used whenever a few moments are available for productive work. Distaffs hold prepared fibers during spinning, keeping them organized and accessible for drawing out steadily. The distaff is a stick with fibers wrapped around its length or attached at the top. It is held under one arm or tucked into a belt while spinning proceeds with both hands. The distaff and spindle together make spinning possible as a portable activity done anywhere while sitting. Women carry these tools and spin while watching animals or children or during any waiting period. Looms transform thread into woven cloth through the interlacing of vertical and horizontal threads and patterns. The loom holds tension on vertical threads while the weaver passes horizontal threads through using a shuttle. The simplest looms are frames with pegs, while more complex versions have heddles for lifting selected threads, creating patterns and designs in finished cloth produced through patient work over extended periods measured in days or weeks depending on cloth length needed. Shuttles carry horizontal thread back and forth through vertical threads during weaving work performed at looms. The shuttle is a smooth wooden piece with thread wound around it that passes easily between threads. The weaver throws the shuttle from side to side, catching it and throwing it back repeatedly. The motion becomes automatic after practice and continues for hours without conscious thought directed to each individual movement made during the repetitive process of cloth creation. Beaters push horizontal threads tightly against previous rows during weaving to create dense cloth fabric. The beater is a flat wooden piece that packs threads together after each pass of the shuttle. Even tension and consistent beating produce cloth of uniform quality throughout its length and width. Irregular beating creates loose or tight spots that weaken the cloth or make it appear poorly made when examined by those who understand proper weaving techniques. Shears cut cloth and fleece and other materials requiring sharp blades working in opposition to each other. The blades pivot on a central pin, allowing them to open and close with hand pressure. Shearing sheep requires large, heavy shears that can cut through thick fleece efficiently and quickly. Smaller shears serve for cutting cloth and thread during sewing and garment construction work. All shears need periodic sharpening to maintain their cutting ability through continued use over time. Days pass in sequences that blur together with little to distinguish one from another except season. The same tasks are performed in the same order at the same times throughout weeks. People rise and work and eat and sleep following patterns established through years of repetition. Variations occur only when weather prevents outdoor work or when illness stops someone from working. Otherwise, each day resembles the previous day in most observable ways that matter for daily functioning. Mornings begin with the same movements performed without conscious thought by people still half asleep. Hands reach for familiar objects in their expected locations without need for vision or searching. Bodies move through routines so practiced that muscles remember the sequences independently of thinking minds. The morning tasks complete themselves through automatic actions repeated daily for entire lifetimes spent in these dwellings. Lighting fires from banked embers happens the same way each morning, using the same materials kept in the same locations near the hearth where they are always stored for convenient access. Small twigs arranged in familiar patterns catch fire when breath encourages embers to flame again. Larger pieces are added in sequences learned through watching others perform this task hundreds of times. The fire builds itself following known progressions from ember to flame to established burning. Water is carried from the well or stream using the same paths worn into the earth by countless previous trips made by this person and others before them over years and generations of continuous use, creating permanent routes. The bucket is lowered and raised using motions that require no thought or attention beyond what muscles provide automatically from long practice. Water is poured into the same vessels kept in the same locations where they always remain when not being used currently. Porridge cooks while people perform other morning tasks that must be completed before leaving for fields. The porridge requires stirring at intervals that are known instinctively without measuring time or counting moments between each stirring. The consistency is judged by appearance and by how the spoon moves through the thickening mixture as cooking continues. When porridge reaches the right state, it is ready and people eat from the same bowls they use every morning. Eating happens quickly with little conversation because people are focused on consuming food and beginning work. The food is plain and familiar and requires no comment or appreciation beyond its presence. Chewing and swallowing are mechanical actions that supply the body with necessary fuel for labor ahead. Empty bowls are set aside to be washed later when someone has time for this task. Walking to the fields follows routes used so frequently that feet find the way without guidance from thinking minds. The paths are known through the soles of feet that have walked them in all seasons and conditions. Every rock and rut and rise in the ground is familiar and expected and requires no attention. Walking happens while the mind is empty or occupied with vague thoughts that drift without direction. Work in the fields begins when people arrive and continues until conditions or exhaustion require stopping. The tasks are the same ones performed yesterday and the day before, extending backward through time. Hands move through familiar motions while minds are occupied with nothing in particular at all really. The work is demanding physically but requires little mental effort once techniques are thoroughly learned and practiced repeatedly. Weeding proceeds row by row with people moving forward at steady pace, pulling unwanted plants mechanically. Each weed is grasped and pulled and tossed aside in movements that repeat endlessly throughout hours. The bending and straightening and reaching become rhythmic patterns that continue without variation or conscious direction from the person performing them. Time passes without being noticed because nothing distinguishes one moment from the next during this work. Conversations during work are sparse and repetitive, covering the same topics discussed many times before without resolution. Comments about weather and crops and animals fill silences without conveying new information to anyone listening. The words are familiar and expected and require no real attention from those who hear them. Speaking and hearing blend into background noise, accompanying work that continues regardless of what is said. Midday brings brief rest and food eaten in fields without returning to the village for formal meals. Bread and cheese carried from home are consumed while sitting on the ground in whatever shade is available. The food is eaten quickly because work waits and daylight is limited by season and sun's position. Rest periods are short and people return to work without lingering or delaying longer than necessary minimally. Afternoon work continues in the same manner as morning work without change in pace or technique applied. The sun moves across the sky, marking time's passage but not affecting the work being performed below. Fatigue increases gradually, but people continue working through discomfort that is familiar and expected always. Stopping would mean less work completed, and work must be done regardless of how bodies feel. Animals must be checked periodically even while other work continues in fields some distance away. Someone walks back to check that pigs remain in pens and chickens have not wandered too far. The checking is quick and routine, with problems rare enough that the task seems unnecessary mostly. But problems do occur occasionally, making the checking worthwhile even when nothing requires attention during most visits. Tools are inspected during brief pauses in work for signs of damage that could cause failure. Handles are checked for cracks and bindings are tested for looseness that might allow separation. Problems are addressed immediately with temporary repairs that allow work to continue without delay for proper fixing. Permanent repairs happen later when time allows for careful work rather than quick expedient solutions applied in moments. Shadows lengthen as afternoon progresses toward evening, and work continues until light becomes insufficient for seeing clearly what hands are doing in the fields where visibility matters for avoiding mistakes. The decision to stop is made individually based on personal judgment about remaining light and work accomplished today and work remaining for tomorrow's continuation. People gather tools and begin walking back toward the village along familiar paths taken every evening. Returning home brings the same sequence of tasks performed every evening without variation or choice about their order. Tools are stored in their usual places where they will be found easily tomorrow morning. Animals are secured for the night with checks that they have food and water sufficient until morning. The dwelling is entered and fire is tended to ensure it continues burning through evening hours ahead. Evening meals resemble morning meals in content and preparation, with pottage or porridge served from the same pot used earlier. Bread accompanies the meal when bread is available from recent baking done days before. Eating is quiet with conversation minimal, as fatigue makes talking seem like unnecessary effort beyond what is required. The meal ends when food is consumed and bowls are set aside for washing eventually. Darkness brings an end to most activities because working without light is impossible for tasks requiring vision. People sit near fires performing simple tasks that can be done by feel or with minimal light provided by flames. Mending and spinning and other handwork continue during these hours using skills developed through years of practice. The work is slow but productive and uses time that would otherwise be empty. Children settle for sleep earlier than adults with their pallets arranged near the fire for warmth during cold nights. The children fall asleep quickly, being tired from playing and helping with small tasks throughout the day. Adults continue sitting and working until they too feel ready for sleep, which comes without difficulty for those tired from physical labor performed since morning. Sleep is deep and untroubled by thoughts because minds are too tired for active thinking during rest. Night sounds include wind and animals and occasional voices from neighboring dwellings close by. The sounds are familiar and expected and do not disturb sleep unless unusually loud or different. People wake periodically to tend fire or for other reasons and then return to sleep easily. The night passes slowly, with darkness lasting many hours during winter seasons when days are short and nights extend endlessly seemingly. Morning will arrive and begin the cycle again with the same tasks in the same order performed by the same people in the same places they have always been. The repetition provides structure and predictability to life that continues without dramatic change or notable events most days of most years throughout entire lifetimes. This continuity is neither questioned nor particularly noticed by those living within its patterns daily. Time is marked by seasons rather than by counted days or weeks that pass without individual distinction or significance except when they align with holy days or required obligations owed to Lord or Church through customary arrangements. The passage of years is noted mainly through children growing and older people aging visibly and deaths that remove familiar faces. Otherwise, years resemble each other closely enough that they blend together in memory without clear boundaries between them. Fields lie in their usual arrangement, stretching across land that has been cultivated for generations. The strips are marked by slight variations in soil color and by the grassy margins separating them. Each strip is known to the family that works it through years of walking and plowing and planting. The knowledge of which strip belongs to which household is carried in memory rather than written records. Disputes over boundaries are rare because everyone knows the arrangements established long before current residents were born. Soil is turned each spring in preparation for planting crops that will grow through summer. The plowing follows the same pattern each year, with furrows running the length of each strip. Oxen pull the plow while a man guides it, keeping the furrow straight and even. The turned soil lies in rows waiting for harrowing that will break the clumps and smooth the surface. The process is the same as it was last year and will be next year. Seeds are scattered across the prepared soil in amounts judged by experience rather than measured precisely. The sowing is done by hand, with seeds cast in sweeping motions as the sower walks. The seeds fall unevenly, with some areas receiving more and others less depending on the motion. This irregularity is expected and accepted as normal for hand sowing without concern about perfect distribution. The seeds that fall will grow where they land if conditions permit their growth. Harrowing smooths the plowed ground and covers the scattered seeds with loose soil for protection. A wooden frame dragged across the field bounces and scrapes, breaking up clumps of earth. The harrow is pulled by an animal or sometimes by a person when animals are unavailable. The work continues until all planted areas have been harrowed sufficiently to cover most seeds. Some seeds remain exposed, but this is acceptable within the normal expectations for planting results. Rain or lack of rain determines much about how crops will grow this season ahead. People watch the sky and note weather patterns but have no control over what occurs. Prayers for good weather are offered, but outcomes remain uncertain regardless of prayers or hopes. Crops grow well in some years and poorly in others, depending on factors beyond human influence. This uncertainty is a constant condition that people accept as part of their existence entirely. Weeds grow among the crop plants and must be removed repeatedly throughout the growing period. The weeding is done by hand with people walking rows and pulling unwanted plants continuously. The same ground is weeded multiple times as new weeds appear from seeds in the soil. Each weeding session resembles previous sessions with the same motions repeated in the same fields. The work is necessary and unending because weeds continue appearing as long as conditions support their growth. Watching crops grow provides little visible change from day to day during the season. Green shoots emerge slowly and thicken gradually over weeks without dramatic transformations visible to observers. The changes are so slow that noticing them requires comparing current state to memory of previous state from days or weeks earlier. Daily observation shows nothing while weekly observation shows slight progress toward maturity and harvest readiness eventually. Insects and birds and other creatures consume portions of growing crops despite efforts to prevent this loss. Children are sent to frighten birds away from newly planted fields where seeds lie exposed. The children wave sticks and shout, but birds return after they leave the area. Some loss to birds and insects is expected and accepted as unavoidable within the normal course of growing food. Only excessive loss prompts additional efforts at protection or prevention of damage to crops. Fences and barriers require constant maintenance to remain effective at containing animals and excluding them from planted areas where they would damage crops by grazing or trampling growing plants underfoot carelessly. Gaps are repaired with wooden stakes and woven branches that fill openings where animals might push through seeking food. The repairs are temporary and must be redone periodically as materials decay or animals dislodge them through repeated attempts at entry into forbidden areas. Paths through fields are maintained by the traffic of feet walking them daily to reach distant strips. The paths are not constructed but simply exist where people regularly walk between locations repeatedly. During wet weather, the paths become muddy tracks that hold water in depressions formed by footsteps. Dry weather hardens the mud, creating uneven surfaces that remain until the next period of rain softens them again into mud once more. Stones collected from fields are piled at margins where they do not interfere with plowing or planting operations. The piles grow slowly over years as more stones are added each season after frost pushes them upward from below ground where they were previously buried beneath the surface level. The stone piles mark boundaries between strips and provide material for occasional building projects when suitable stones are needed for construction purposes. Ditches drain excess water from fields, preventing standing water that would damage crops or make soil too wet for plowing and planting at appropriate times determined by season and weather conditions present during spring preparation periods when work must proceed on schedule regardless of minor obstacles encountered. The ditches require periodic cleaning to remove accumulated sediment and vegetation that blocks water flow, causing backing up into fields where drainage is needed most urgently. Hedgerows grow along boundaries, providing barriers and windbreaks and habitat for birds and small animals living within the tangled branches and thorny growth that develops over years without deliberate cultivation or management beyond occasional cutting back when growth becomes excessive and begins encroaching on cultivated land needed for crops, feeding the village population dependent on agricultural production for survival through each year. Trees growing near fields provide shade and timber and fuel wood when branches are cut or when entire trees are felled for construction needs or firewood gathering to supply households with burning material necessary for cooking and minimal heating during cold months when outdoor temperatures drop significantly below comfortable levels, making indoor fires essential for basic comfort and food preparation requirements. Common pasture land supports grazing animals during seasons when grass grows and provides adequate nutrition for livestock maintained by village households, collectively sharing these resources according to customary rights established generations before current residents began their lives within this community, bound by tradition and mutual dependence on shared land and water and other essential resources. Animals grazing in common areas are watched by someone assigned to prevent them from straying into forbidden areas or becoming lost in surrounding woods where finding them would be difficult and time-consuming, requiring search efforts that take people away from other necessary work, demanding their attention and labor throughout each day when tasks accumulate faster than they can be completed by available workers. Woodland areas beyond the fields provide resources gathered by villagers for various purposes throughout the year. Fallen branches are collected for firewood and construction materials, and tool handles carved from suitable pieces selected for their straightness and strength adequate for intended uses. Nuts and berries and mushrooms are gathered during appropriate seasons when they ripen and become available for collection by those who know where to find them. Pigs are driven into woods during autumn months when acorns and beechnuts fall from trees, providing food that fattens the animals before winter slaughter provides meat for households through cold months ahead when fresh food becomes scarce, and preserved meat supplies necessary protein missing from grain-based diet consumed primarily throughout the year by most people living within the village boundaries. Wild animals living in woods and fields are generally avoided or ignored unless they threaten crops or livestock or provide hunting opportunities when encountered by those with skills and rights to take game from lands controlled by the manor lord, who reserves hunting privileges for himself primarily, though some limited taking may be permitted under certain conditions. Rivers and streams provide water for drinking and washing and occasional fish caught by those with time and equipment for this activity. The water flows continuously regardless of season, though volume varies with rainfall affecting how much water moves through channels carved into the land by countless years of flowing water wearing away soil and rock gradually over time, measured in centuries rather than years or decades of human observation. Mills built on streams use water power to grind grain into flour for the village and surrounding area. The mill is owned by the lord and villagers must pay to have their grain ground here. The miller operates the mill and lives nearby in a dwelling associated with this essential function. The mill operates when water flow is sufficient to turn the wheel powering the grinding stones inside. Maintaining existing conditions requires constant attention to prevent gradual deterioration of structures and tools. Roofs need periodic inspection for places where thatch has thinned or blown away during storms. The thin spots allow rain to enter and wet the interior spaces below, causing problems. Repairs involve adding new bundles of straw over the damaged areas and tying them securely. The work is done when weather permits and materials are available for use immediately. Walls develop cracks as daub dries and shrinks away from the wattle framework holding it. The cracks grow wider over time if not filled with fresh daub mixture applied regularly. Rain enters through cracks and softens the remaining daub, causing more damage over time gradually. Filling cracks is ongoing work that is never truly finished because new cracks appear constantly. The work continues year after year, maintaining walls in adequate condition for continued shelter. Fences sag and develop gaps where posts rot at ground level or animals push against them. The gaps must be repaired before animals discover them and escape into planted fields nearby. New stakes are cut and driven into ground beside rotted posts to provide support. Woven branches are added to fill openings and restore the barrier to functional condition again. The repairs last until the next problem develops, requiring additional attention and work from someone. Tools wear from constant use and require maintenance to remain functional for their intended purposes. Wooden handles crack and split and must be replaced before they break completely during work. Metal edges become dull and must be sharpened on stones to restore their cutting ability. Broken tools are repaired when possible or replaced when repair is not practical or effective. The cycle of maintenance and replacement continues without end throughout the year and across years. Storage areas must be checked regularly for signs of moisture or pests that threaten stored grain. Damp grain spoils quickly and must be removed before mold spreads to surrounding grain in the container. Mice and rats eat stored grain and leave droppings that contaminate what remains for human use. Finding and blocking entry points reduces pest problems but does not eliminate them entirely from storage spaces. The checking continues regularly because problems develop quickly when neglected even briefly during busy period. DS. Bedding requires refreshing when straw compresses and becomes uncomfortable for sleeping on nightly. Old straw is removed and replaced with fresh straw that provides better cushioning temporarily. The straw compresses again over weeks, requiring another replacement cycle to begin eventually when discomfort becomes significant enough to motivate the work involved in changing bedding materials completely. This cycle repeats several times each year depending on the quality of straw used initially. Fires must be maintained continuously because rekindling from nothing is difficult without proper materials. Someone adds wood periodically throughout the day, keeping flames burning at levels appropriate for current needs. Too much wood wastes fuel while too little allows fire to die, requiring effort to rekindle. Balancing fuel use against need becomes automatic through long practice and attention to the fire's condition. At night, embers are banked under ash to preserve them until morning rekindling begins the cycle again. Ashes accumulate in hearths and must be removed periodically to prevent smothering the fire completely. The removal requires carefully scooping ash without disturbing live embers buried underneath the surface layer. Removed ash is carried outside and spread on gardens or discarded in designated areas. Some ash is kept for making lye used in soap production when enough fat is available. The ash removal is simple work but necessary for continued fire maintenance throughout the year. Water containers require cleaning when residue builds up on interior surfaces, affecting the taste. The containers are scrubbed with sand or cloth to remove deposits left by minerals in water. Wooden containers absorb liquid and darken over time, developing permanent stains that cannot be removed. Clay vessels crack if dropped or exposed to sudden temperature changes during use or cleaning. Replacing broken vessels happens as needed when damage makes them unusable for holding liquids safely. Clothing repairs occupy time whenever garments develop tears or worn areas that need attention. Torn sections are sewn together using thread and needles available in the household currently. Worn areas are patched with pieces cut from garments too damaged for continued use otherwise. The patches are sewn on roughly without concern for appearance because function matters more. Repaired garments continue in use until they become more patched than original fabric remaining visible. Shoes wear through its soles from walking on rough ground daily throughout the year continuously. The worn soles are sometimes patched with leather pieces when material is available for this purpose. More often, worn shoes are simply used until they fall apart completely and cannot be repaired. New shoes are made when old ones fail or sometimes before if resources permit earlier replacement. The cycle of wearing and replacing continues as long as people need foot protection from ground surfaces. Gardens require weeding just as field crops do because unwanted plants grow wherever conditions support their growth patterns. The garden weeding happens whenever someone has time between other tasks demanding attention currently. Weeding is never finished because new weeds appear from seeds in soil or blown in by wind. The garden receives attention when convenient rather than on a fixed schedule determined by calendar dates. Fences around gardens need the same maintenance as field fences to keep animals out of growing vegetables. Chickens especially will enter gardens if gaps exist and will scratch up planted areas searching for insects. Pigs will root through gardens, destroying everything if they gain access to the enclosed space. Maintaining garden fences is important for protecting food that supplements grain-based meals consumed daily by household members year-round. Paths around the dwelling are kept clear of vegetation by regular foot traffic that prevents plants from establishing themselves in frequently used areas. The paths are not deliberately constructed but exist where people habitually walk between buildings and work areas. During wet weather, the paths become muddy, requiring careful walking to avoid slipping. Dry weather hardens the paths into uneven surfaces that remain until the next rain cycle softens them again into mud once more, as always happens. Checking animals happens multiple times daily to ensure they remain healthy and secure in their enclosures. Morning checks confirm animals survived the night without incident or escape during darkness hours. Midday checks ensure water and food supplies remain adequate for continued animal health maintenance. Evening checks prepare animals for night by securing them in shelters or pens appropriate for their size. The checking is routine but necessary because problems develop quickly when animals are neglected even briefly. Collecting eggs from chickens happens daily to prevent hens from hiding eggs in unexpected places. The collection follows the same pattern each day with checking the usual nesting spots first. Eggs are gathered carefully to prevent breaking them during collection and transport to storage. The number collected varies daily depending on season and hen productivity currently observable. Winter brings fewer eggs while spring and summer provide more abundant production from the same birds. Feeding pigs involves carrying scraps and waste food from the dwelling to their enclosure nearby. The pigs eat nearly anything offered, including vegetable trimmings and spoiled food unsuitable for humans. They also receive gathered materials like acorns when available during autumn months of abundance. The feeding happens once or twice daily depending on available food supplies and time for this task. Pigs grow slowly and require months of feeding before reaching appropriate size for slaughter eventually. Milking cows happens twice daily when animals are producing milk after calving in spring. The milking is done by hand with someone sitting beside the cow and pulling teats rhythmically. Milk streams into a wooden bucket placed below the udder to catch it. The bucket fills slowly, requiring patience and continued pulling until the cow is empty. The fresh milk is used immediately or processed into butter or cheese for preservation beyond a few hours. Churning butter requires patience and steady motion continued for extended periods until butter suddenly forms. The cream is agitated in a wooden container by moving a plunger up and down repeatedly. The motion continues for what seems like a long time without obvious progress toward completion. Then suddenly the cream separates into butter and buttermilk without warning or gradual transition. The butter is removed and washed with cold water to remove remaining buttermilk before storage. Washing containers and utensils happens when they become too dirty for continued use comfortably. The washing uses cold water and cloth or hands to scrub surfaces reasonably clean. Wooden items are never thoroughly cleaned because wood absorbs liquids and stains permanently over time. Clay vessels are scrubbed more thoroughly but still retain residues in rough surfaces and cracks. The washing removes visible dirt but does not achieve what would later be considered truly clean conditions. Sweeping floors removes loose dirt and debris that accumulates from daily activities and traffic through the dwelling. The sweeping is done with bundled twigs or straw tied together, forming crude brooms used repeatedly. Swept material is pushed outside where chickens peck through it looking for edible pieces they can consume. The packed earth floor never looks clean, but sweeping keeps it from becoming excessively dirty and uncomfortable. The sweeping happens daily or whenever someone notices the floor needs attention currently. Work continues as it has continued for as long as anyone can remember through stories. The tasks are the same tasks performed by parents and grandparents before them in the same locations. Methods do not change because the methods work adequately for producing what is needed. No one questions whether different approaches might exist because current approaches are the only ones known. The knowledge passes from older to younger through demonstration and participation rather than through explanation or instruction. Hands move through familiar motions without requiring thought or conscious direction from minds. The motions have been practiced so many times that muscles remember them independently. Pulling weeds requires no mental effort beyond deciding to begin the task currently. Walking to the fields happens automatically with feet finding the path without eyes needing to watch. Stirring porridge happens while thinking about nothing or about something completely unrelated to the stirring. Days are not counted or tracked individually because one day resembles another closely enough. The passage of time is noticed through seasonal changes rather than through counting individual days. Spring becomes summer, which becomes autumn, which becomes winter, which becomes spring again in cycles. The cycles repeat without variation in their sequence or timing beyond minor differences each year. Years pass and are marked by events like births and deaths rather than by numbers. Children grow slowly, becoming more capable of performing tasks that were previously too difficult. A child who could not carry water eventually becomes strong enough to manage the bucket. A child who could not weed carefully eventually learns to distinguish crop plants from weeds accurately. The growth happens gradually without sudden transformations that mark clear transitions from one state to another. One season the child is too small and another season the child is capable. Adults age slowly with changes that accumulate over years rather than appearing suddenly or dramatically. Hair grays and skin wrinkles and movement becomes slightly stiffer and slower over time, measured in decades. The changes are so gradual that daily observation does not reveal them clearly to anyone. Only comparing current state to memories from years earlier shows the extent of aging. By the time aging is obvious, the person has been aging for many years already. Old people continue working as long as their bodies permit movement and basic functioning. They perform lighter tasks that require less strength or endurance than heavy field labor. Spinning and mending and watching children occupy those who cannot manage strenuous work any longer. The elderly remain useful contributors until very near the end of their lives entirely. Retirement from work is not a concept that exists within this community at all currently. Death comes from illness or injury or simply from old age when the body stops functioning. Bodies are wrapped in cloth and buried in the churchyard within days of death occurring. Graves are marked with wooden crosses that decay over years until they disappear completely. The location of older graves becomes uncertain as markers vanish and memories fade among the living. New graves are dug in spaces that may contain previous burials forgotten by everyone currently alive. Life expectancy is short by later standards but seems normal to those living it currently. Many children die before reaching adulthood from diseases and accidents and conditions that later times will prevent. Adults who survive childhood often die in their 30s or 40s from various causes. Reaching old age means living perhaps into the 50s or rarely into the 60s. These spans seem adequate and natural because they are the only spans anyone knows directly. Memories extend backward only as far as the oldest living person can remember from their childhood. Beyond that point, knowledge comes from stories told by previous generations before they died. The stories change slightly with each telling and with each generation passing them forward. Details are lost or altered or embellished without written records to verify accuracy. The past becomes increasingly vague and uncertain the further back one attempts to trace it. Written records are almost non-existent within the village itself, where few people can read or write. The priest maintains records of baptisms and marriages and deaths in books kept at the church. Tax records and land records exist somewhere in the manor house, but villagers never see them. Most knowledge is carried in memory and passed through oral transmission between people and generations. What is forgotten is simply lost forever without possibility of recovery from any source. Changes occur so slowly that they are imperceptible within single lifetimes spent in the village. A building added or a family dying out or a field boundary shifting slightly make no impression. The village feels permanent and unchanging to those living within it despite gradual changes occurring over decades. Each generation perceives the village as fundamentally the same as it has always been throughout time. Innovation is rare because traditional methods work well enough for survival and comfort levels expected. Someone might occasionally try a slightly different approach to a task, but radical changes do not occur. New ideas are viewed with suspicion because they might fail and cause problems worse than current problems. Safety lies in following established practices proven through generations of use without major failures remembered clearly. Crops grown are the same crops grown every year without experimentation with new plants. Wheat and barley and oats are reliable and known and adequate for producing food. Other plants might exist elsewhere but are unknown here and therefore not considered for cultivation. The fields produce what they have always produced in amounts that vary by weather and pests. Animals kept are the same types of animals kept for generations without additions or changes. Chickens and pigs and cows and sheep provide what is needed from livestock currently available. Other animals might exist but are not part of this village's animal population. The animals reproduce themselves, maintaining the population without requiring outside animals to be brought in. Tools used are the same tools used by previous generations with the same designs and materials. An axe is an iron blade on a wooden handle without variation in this basic design. A plow is a wooden frame with an iron tip shape to cut soil efficiently. The tools work adequately so no one seeks to change them or create different versions. Broken tools are replaced with identical tools made the same way as before always. Buildings are constructed using the same methods and materials used for all previous buildings in the village. Timber frames filled with wattle and daub and thatched roofs represent the only building style anyone knows. Stone is used only for the church and manor house which were built long ago. Common dwellings are always built the same way because this way is known and works satisfactorily. Clothing styles remain constant across generations with only minor variations in details that do not affect overall appearance. Tunics and hose for men and long dresses for women are the standard garments worn. The garments are shaped the same way and worn the same way by everyone in similar social positions. Differences in clothing indicate status rather than personal preference or fashion choices made individually by wearers. Food eaten is the same food eaten for generations without new dishes or preparations introduced from elsewhere. Porridge and pottage and bread form the foundation of every meal with minor additions when available. The preparation methods are standard and known and produce predictable results every time. Meals are not occasions for creativity or experimentation with flavors or techniques beyond what is traditional here. Language spoken contains words and expressions used for generations without deliberate changes or additions from outside. New words enter slowly through contact with travelers or traders passing through the area occasionally. The language feels permanent and natural to speakers who do not consider that it could be different. Pronunciation and grammar are learned through hearing and speaking rather than through formal instruction or rules. Beliefs about the world are passed down as facts without questioning or testing their accuracy. The earth is flat and the sun moves across the sky and stars are fixed to a sphere rotating overhead. These explanations match observations well enough that they are accepted without doubt or investigation. No one considers alternative explanations because the current explanations are adequate and traditional and unquestioned by anyone. The village exists as part of a larger world, but that world is distant and largely irrelevant. Events happening elsewhere do not affect daily life here in ways that are noticed or important. Wars and politics and trade happen somewhere else involving other people who are not part of this community. The village is the entire world that matters to those living within its boundaries daily. Tasks continue in sequences that have been repeated countless times before without alteration or interruption. Hands reach for tools in their familiar locations and grasp them without looking or searching. Bodies move through routines that require no conscious direction because the movements are automatic. Work proceeds from one task to another following patterns established through years of daily repetition. The patterns feel natural and inevitable because no other patterns have ever been known or considered. Morning begins with fire and water and porridge prepared in the usual manner always. The fire is rekindled from embers banked the previous evening using methods that have never changed. Water is carried from the same source along the same path walked every morning before. Porridge cooks in the same pot hung over the fire at the same height above flames. The process completes itself through actions performed without thought or variation from expected sequence. Fields receive attention that maintains them in their current condition without improvement or deterioration noticeable. Weeds are pulled when they appear and crops are monitored as they grow slowly. The monitoring involves walking through fields and observing plants without taking specific actions beyond occasional weeding. The walking and observing happen regularly because they have always happened regularly as part of maintaining fields. Animals are fed and watered and moved between locations according to daily patterns that vary only with seasons. Morning feeding happens at the same time using the same materials gathered and prepared previously. Animals are let out of enclosures to graze or forage in areas where they graze and forage daily. Evening brings them back to enclosures where they spend nights protected from weather and predators potentially present. Cooking happens throughout the day, preparing meals that consist of the same ingredients combined in familiar ways. Porridge and pottage and bread form the basis of meals without variation beyond what ingredients are currently available. The cooking methods are standard and produce results that taste as expected because the methods never change. Meals are consumed without comment because they are neither surprising nor disappointing in any way. Repairs are made to buildings and tools and clothing as needed to maintain them in usable condition. The repairs use techniques learned through observation and practiced until they become automatic skills applied without thinking. Broken items are fixed if fixing is possible or replaced if fixing is not practical currently. The cycle of use and repair and eventual replacement continues without reaching any permanent resolution or completion. Checking stored grain happens at intervals to ensure it remains dry and free from pests eating it. The checking involves looking at grain and sometimes moving it to examine lower layers not visible from above. Problems found are addressed by removing damaged grain or attempting to eliminate pests present currently. The checking continues regularly because problems develop constantly when storage areas are not monitored by someone responsible. Collecting eggs and milking cows and feeding pigs occupy time each day in amounts that vary slightly. The tasks are performed at similar times daily following routines that ensure animals receive necessary care. The routines are maintained because animals require consistent care to remain healthy and productive for household needs. Neglecting animals would create problems affecting food supplies relied upon for daily consumption by all household members. Spinning thread occupies hands during moments when other work is not demanding immediate attention fully. The spinning happens while sitting and talking or while watching children or animals nearby requiring supervision. Thread accumulates slowly through many small sessions of spinning distributed throughout days and weeks. The accumulated thread is eventually used for weaving or sewing when sufficient quantity has been produced. Walking between locations follows paths established through repeated use by many people over many years. The paths connect dwellings to fields and water sources and other important locations within the village area. Walking happens automatically with feet finding the way without conscious attention to navigation or route selection. The paths are known thoroughly through countless previous walks along their length in all seasons and conditions. Weather changes gradually through days and weeks, bringing variations in temperature and precipitation that affect work. Cold weather makes outdoor work uncomfortable but does not stop tasks that must be completed regardless of discomfort. Rain stops some work while allowing other work to proceed indoors or under shelter available. The weather is accepted as a condition affecting how work is done but not whether work happens. Seasons change in their usual progression from one to another, marking time's passage more clearly than individual days. Spring brings planting and summer brings growth and autumn brings harvest and winter brings indoor work. The seasonal cycle repeats annually with variations in weather and yields but not in the fundamental pattern. The pattern is reliable enough that people plan activities around expected seasonal conditions each year. Children grow, gradually becoming more capable helpers in household tasks requiring increasing strength and skill levels. A child who could carry small amounts of water eventually carries full buckets without difficulty noticed. A child who watched adults work eventually performs the same work independently without supervision needed constantly. The transition from watching to helping to working independently happens slowly over years of gradual development. Adults continue working at the same tasks year after year without significant changes in what they do. A person who weeds fields will weed fields for decades until age makes the work impossible. A person who tends animals will tend animals throughout their working life without changing to different work. The consistency provides stability and predictability that shapes daily existence for everyone in the village community. Tools are maintained and used and eventually replaced when they wear beyond usefulness for their intended purposes. The replacement tools are made the same way as the tools they replace, using identical materials and methods. The new tools function identically to the old tools they have replaced in service. The cycle of use and wear and replacement continues indefinitely without reaching any final state of completion. Buildings require ongoing maintenance to remain weatherproof and structurally sound for continued occupation by residents. Roofs are patched and walls are repaired and floors are maintained in adequate condition through regular attention. The maintenance never ends because deterioration continues constantly from weather and use and time passing. Performing maintenance keeps buildings in their current state without improvement beyond their original construction quality level. Food preparation follows the same methods day after day, producing meals that taste familiar and expected always. The familiarity is comfortable rather than boring because it represents normalcy and security in daily life. Unexpected foods or flavors would be strange and possibly unwelcome changes from what is known and preferred. The sameness in meals reflects the sameness in other aspects of life within the village boundaries. Conversations cover familiar topics discussed many times previously without introducing new information or perspectives different from established views. Talk of weather and crops and animals fills time while working or resting near fires. The conversations are predictable and comfortable, requiring no mental effort beyond participating in expected exchanges. New topics are rare because most things worth discussing have been discussed already many times before. Sleep comes easily to those tired from physical work performed throughout the day consistently. The sleeping arrangements are familiar and comfortable enough for restful sleep despite being simple by later standards. Dreams occur but are rarely remembered upon waking in the morning when daily routines begin again. Sleep provides necessary rest, allowing work to continue the next day in the same patterns as always. Morning will bring the same tasks in the same order performed by the same people. Water will be carried and fire will be built and porridge will cook while people prepare for another day. Fields will be tended and animals will be cared for and meals will be prepared following established routines. Evening will bring darkness and rest and sleep before morning begins the cycle once more, as it always has and always will for as long as anyone can imagine, time continuing forward without end or significant change from current conditions that feel permanent and unchanging to those living within them daily throughout their entire lives spent here in this place doing this work among these people who are the only people, and this place which is the only place that matters or exists in any meaningful way within the boundaries of awareness and experience available to them.